హలో అండి, వెల్కమ్ టు T1 అకాడమీ. సో ఈరోజు మనం ఈ వీడియోలో డిస్కస్ చేయబోయే మోస్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ టాపిక్, బర్నింగ్ టాపిక్, కంటెంపరీ టాపిక్ ఆఫ్ ద వరల్డ్, రష్యా యుక్రెయిన్ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్. సో ఈ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ యొక్క బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ ఏంటి, దీనివల్ల వరల్డ్ జియో పాలిటిక్స్ మీద పడబోయే ఇంప్లికేషన్స్ ఏంటి అనేది ఈ వీడియోలో తెలుసుకుందాం. సో లెట్స్ ప్రొసీడ్. బేసికలీ వాట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్ ఫార్ ద కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ బిట్వీన్ రష్యా అండ్ యుక్రెయిన్ అని తెలుసుకోబోయే ముందు అసలు బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ ఏంటి అనేది తెలుసుకుందాం. హిస్టరీ, వాట్ ఈస్ ద హిస్టరీ బిహైండ్ దిస్ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్. ప్రతి కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్కి, ప్రతి వరల్డ్ ఇష్యూకి ఒక హిస్టరీ అనేది ఉంటుంది. దేర్ ఆర్ సర్టన్ బాయిలింగ్ ఈవెంట్స్ అండ్ దెన్ దెర్ ఇస్ అన్ ఇమీడియట్ కాజ్. సో యుక్రెయిన్ క్రైసిస్ జరుగుతున్న ఈ తరుణంలో దీని యొక్క causes ఏంటి, what are the reasons, what is the immediate cause for the Russia-Ukraine conflict అనేది తెలుసుకుందాం. So Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, that is the former USSR, the earlier name of Russia. It is commonly called as Soviet Union, world's first and biggest communist state and ఇది, which was an answer to the Western capitalism. So Russia, that is USSR, was born out of the Russian Revolution in the year 1917. First World War జరుగుతున్నప్పుడు రష్యాలో రష్యన్ రెవల్యూషన్ చోటు చేసుకుంది. యాజ్ అ రిజల్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద రష్యన్ రెవల్యూషన్ యుఎస్ఎస్ఆర్ అనే ఒక కొత్త స్టేట్ ఫామ్ అయింది. ఈ స్టేట్ ఫార్మేషన్ వల్ల మొనార్కీ అనేది రష్యాలో ఎండ్ అయిపోయింది. సో the formation of USSR in 1917 put a full stop to monarchy that was being led by the Tsars Nicholas II. He was overthrown or thrown out of power in Russia by the formation of USSR in 1917. This is the erstwhile USSR map. చూడండి, 1991లో USSR విడిపోయినప్పుడు 15 చిన్న చిన్న దేశాలు ఫామ్ అయినాయి. Some of those countries are Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine. ప్రస్తుతం జరిగే వార్ అంటారా, కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ అంటారా, వాట్ ఎవర్ యూ కాల్ ఇట్, ద టెన్షన్స్ బిట్వీన్ రష్యా అండ్ యుక్రెయిన్, దిస్ ఇస్ ద కంట్రీ. బెలరస్ అనే ఈ ప్రదేశంలో డిప్లొమాటిక్ టైస్ రీఇన్స్టేట్ చేయడానికి బిట్వీన్ రష్యా అండ్ యుక్రెయిన్ ప్రయత్నాలు జరుగుతున్నాయి బై వరల్డ్ కంట్రీస్. లాట్వియా, ఎస్టోనియా, లుథియానా, ఇవన్నీ కూడా చిన్న చిన్న కంట్రీస్ యుఎస్ఎస్ఆర్ విడిపోయిన తర్వాత ఫామ్ అయిన countries. So Soviet Union was the face of communism that engaged in rivalry between the capitalistic forces from the West that was represented by United Nations and the NATO countries, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that was signed by USA and Canada along with 28 other European allies. NATO antar dani North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Until the dissolution or disintegration of USSR was fighting on one side with communism as its ideology against capitalistic ideologies of the West. Moving further, so 1991లో USSR disintegration or డిజల్యూషన్ అయిన తర్వాత 15 కంట్రీస్ ఫామ్ అయినాయి. 15 దేశాలు ఆ యుఎస్ఎస్ఆర్ లోంచి పుట్టే, అందులో రష్యా ఈజ్ the greatest nation, the biggest nation, only to be followed by Ukraine. Economically, politically, Russia enta strongo, ante stronger Ukraine tanan tanu తీర్చిదిద్దుకుంది. సో నేటో వర్సెస్ వార్సా. నేటో అంటే ఇందాకే చెప్పుకున్నాం, నార్త్ అట్లాంటిక్ ట్రీటీ ఆర్గనైజేషన్ విచ్ ఇస్ లెడ్ బై యుఎస్ఏ. కెనడా is also a part of the NATO along with 28 other European allies who are a part of the NATO. This is an answer to the Warsaw Pact that was actually signed by the erstwhile Soviet Russia. So with the destruction of dini history chudamu, with the destruction of the Nazi German Nazi party destruction అయిపోయింది Second World War లో. Second World War time duration 1939 to 1945. So ఈ డ్యూరేషన్ అప్పుడు Germany, Japan and Italy were the Axis powers, whereas Soviet Russia, USA and Britain were the allied powers. So this was a relationship of convenience, an alliance of convenience antaru. Endukante the enemy was common, so the three nations got together to finish the Nazi rule in Germany. So with the destruction, Second World War అయిపోయిన తర్వాత ఈ రిలేషన్షిప్ ఆఫ్ కన్వీనియన్స్ అనే దాంట్లో క్రాక్స్ మొదలైనాయి బిట్వీన్ సోవియట్ రష్యా అండ్ ద యునైటెడ్ స్టేట్స్. యాజ్ అ రిజల్ట్, ది అమెరికన్స్ అండ్ ద బ్రిటిష్ ఫియర్డ్ ద స్ప్రెడ్ ఆఫ్ కమ్యూనిజం ఇన్ వెస్టర్న్ యూరోప్ అండ్ బియాండ్. Russia started spreading its wings, which started fear psychosis among the Americans and the British. And in response to this fear, USA, Canada and its Western European allies formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is the NATO, in the year 1949. So as you can see in this map, all the blue colored nations are the NATO nations, and red color, as we all know, is a symbol of communism, and this is the Warsaw Pact, the countries under the Warsaw Pact, that is Soviet Russia and its neighbors. So to counter the NATO alliance, 28 European countries as on date with USA and Canada as its chief members, the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact, which consisted of the communist-dominated nations of Eastern Europe, and the Warsaw Pact was signed in 1955, and thus the Cold War, that is the division of the world into two blocks, the communist bloc of USSR and the capitalistic bloc of USA and its allies had begun. సో రష్యా యుక్రెయిన్ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ యొక్క బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ చూద్దాము. రెండు దేశాలు ఒకే దేశం నుంచి పుట్టిన ఈ రెండు దేశాల మధ్య అసలు కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ ఎందుకు వచ్చింది? సో పోస్ట్ ద డిసింటిగ్రేషన్ ఆఫ్ సోవియట్ యూనియన్ విడిపోయిన తర్వాత యుక్రెయిన్ కూడా 1991లో ఇండిపెండెంట్ కంట్రీగా డిక్లేర్ అయింది. అంటిల్ దెన్ యుక్రెయిన్ వాజ్ అ మెంబర్ ఆఫ్ ద సోవియట్ యూనియన్, అండ్ after the disintegration also Russia tried to play the role of a big brother, trying to continue its influence on all the countries which split or which disintegrated and formed as separate independent nations. So protests in Ukraine, pro-Russian protests rather. So Euromaidan movement and okati jarigindandi in the year 2013 in the European square. Okay, this was a civil unrest, this was demonstrations by public. Enduku jarigina ee demonstrations ante the protest was sparked by Ukrainian government's decision to suspend the signing of an association agreement with the European Union and choose closer ties with Russia. మనకి దగ్గరగా ఉన్న రష్యాతో ఎక్కువ సంబంధాలు పెట్టుకోవాలి, దూరంగా ఉన్న ఎక్కడో వెస్టర్న్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ తోటి మీరు ఎందుకు అసోసియేషన్ అగ్రిమెంట్ సైన్ చేస్తున్నారు అని జరిగిన పబ్లిక్ ప్రొటెస్ట్ని యూరోమీడియన్ మూవ్మెంట్ అంటారు. ఇది యుక్రెయినియన్ క్యాపిటల్ ఆఫ్ కియెవ్లో జరిగింది ఇన్ ది ఇయర్ 2013, నవంబర్ 2013లో. ఓకే, నౌ యాజ్ యూ కెన్ సీ, సో ఇదంతా all these green colored, the green color in the map represents all the EU nations, and this is Ukraine. This is Ukraine at the eye of the storm, as they call it. As we move on, in 2014, a separatist insurgency started in Ukraine's eastern industrial Donetsk region, Donetsk basin, and this was called the Revolution of Dignity. This was called the Revolution of Dignity. ఏం జరిగింది? Russia further gained a maritime advantage in the region due to its annexation and invasion of Crimea in the year 2014. 2014లో క్రిమియా అనే ప్రాంతాన్ని, యుక్రెయిన్కి చెందిన క్రిమియా అనే ప్రాంతం కోస్టల్ రీజన్. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ వెరీ క్రూషియల్ ఫర్ యుక్రెయిన్ యాజ్ వెల్ as Russia with regard to trade, with regard to maritime trade, ante trade through waters with connections to the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Now, as a result of this tension, the buildup of tension between Ukraine and Russia, USA and EU, that is European Union, have pledged to safeguard the integrity of Ukraine's borders in case of further aggression and invasion policies of Russia. తర్వాత ఏం జరిగింది? Ukraine and Russia have shared cultural and linguistic ties for hundreds of years. After all, they're born from the same land. People belong to the same land. So their cultural, linguistic ties, familial ties will never disintegrate. Ukraine was the most powerful country of the Soviet Union after Russia. Ukraine has been a hub for commercial industries, factories, as well as defense manufacturing. So Ukraine tanani taanu sontaga nilabettukundi. It built itself, made itself independent, came out of the umbrella protection of so-called Russia, and it has become a hub for commercial industries, factories, as well as for defense mechanism. Ukraine also provides Russia with the access to the Black Sea and crucial connectivity to the Mediterranean through Crimea ane region. So andukani Crimea ni invade chesi, annex chesindi Russia. Now, what are the chief reasons for the aggression? There are economic reasons, there are geopolitical strategic factors, and there is also this fear of the enlargement of the NATO that is led by the USA. Now, Russia, considering the economic significance of Ukraine, indak cheppukunnattuga Ukraine has got a lot of commercial factories, production manufacturing units, as well as defense mechanisms. So economic significance of Ukraine, Russia sought Ukraine's membership in the Eurasian Economic Community. Just like the EU, the Eurasian countries, they have an economic community which was turned down by Ukraine. With its huge market and advanced agriculture and industrial output, Ukraine was supposed to play an important role in the EA EC. But Ukraine refused to join this agreement of free trade which came into existence in the year 2015. So what happened later? Russia claims that the eastward expansion by the NATO, which they call enlargement, has threatened Russia's interests, is a threat to Russia's borders and security, and therefore it has asked for a written security guarantee and assurance from the NATO nations. The NATO that is led by USA has planned to install missile defense systems or mechanism in East European countries like Poland and the Czech Republic, which probably will counter Russia's intercontinental range missiles. Now, what is NATO? NATO is a military agreement of 28 European and 2 North American countries, that is USA and Canada. Okay, enlargement of NATO is the process of including new members, inducting new members into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Dani enlargement ani pilustaru. Since German unification in 1990 after the fall of the Wall of Berlin, NATO has added new members as many as 5 times. It began with 12 founding members in 1949 and it currently has 30 members. Like I told you, 28 European countries, USA and Canada are currently the members of the NATO. The members include the 3 Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, which share land borders with Russia. So obviously Russia cannot be held wrong in feeling extremely threatened by the enlargement of NATO. The members also include countries like Hungary, Poland, Romania and Bulgaria, all of which were a part of the erstwhile Soviet Union. Moving on, Russia has been indulging in massive military buildup along its borders with Ukraine, which is supposedly going to be a NATO member, and Russia has stated that this troop deployment along the borders of Ukraine was a response to NATO's steady eastward expansion. Russia also argues that its moves are aimed to protecting its own security considerations, and Russia has been successful in invading Ukraine and is now claiming to gain an upper hand. The Russian troops are about 30 to 40 kilometers away from the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, as you and I discuss here on this video, as I record this video here today. Russia now demands an assurance from the US that Ukraine will not be inducted into the NATO, and this has resulted in more tensions between Russia and the West, which has been supportive of the Ukraine. The US has assured Ukraine that it will respond decisively, and President Joe Biden of the USA has gone ahead and pledged $360 million in defense in response to help Ukraine in the times of need. Now, as you see, Donetsk and Luhansk, these are the 2 places where supposed insurgency, Russian-supported insurgency, is happening in Ukraine. And as we record this video, these places are already under the control of Russia. And Crimea, this was the place that was invaded and annexed by Russia in the year 2014. This is Belarus, where the diplomatic agencies are waiting to begin a dialogue between both the warring countries, Ukraine as well as Russia. Now, what are Russia's demands? Russia has demanded a ban on further expansion of NATO that includes countries like Ukraine and Georgia, which share land borders with Russia. Russia has asked NATO to pull back its deployments to the early 1990s level and prohibit the deployment of intermediate range missiles in its bordering countries or areas. And it has further asked NATO to curb military cooperation with Ukraine and all the other former Soviet republics. Now, what was the response that these demands of Russia received from the West? The US has ruled out changing NATO's open door policy, which means it will continue enlarging the NATO. The US also says it will continue to offer training and weapons to Ukraine. But the US has also said that it is open to a discussion regarding missile deployment and mutual reduction of military forces and exercises in Eastern Europe. Germany, as we're discussing responses from the West, Germany has also warned Russia that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would be stopped if Russia were to invade Ukraine. What is Nord Stream 2 pipeline? This is a pipeline which is an undersea pipeline that supplies gas to Germany from Russia, and Germany now says that it is not going to buy any more gas from Russia in case Russia were to invade Ukraine. The US threatens Russia by imposing new economic sanctions in case of any attempts against the Ukraine, but there's no stopping Mr. Putin as of now. Ukraine crisis, what are the global implications? Maintaining strong relations with Russia serves India's national interests. As we know, India's needle is always deflected towards Soviet Russia. India has to retain a strong strategic alliance with Russia. As a result, India cannot join any Western strategy aimed at isolating Russia. There is also a possibility of CAATSA, that is, Countering American Adversities Through Sanctions Act. It is a US federal act that has already imposed sanctions on Iran, North Korea and Russia. They may also put sanctions on India. Further, a pact between USA and Russia might affect Russia's relations with China, and this might allow India to expand its efforts to re-establish its ties, if at all. This is a very hypothetical situation. The issue with Ukraine is that the world is becoming increasingly economically and geopolitically connected thanks to globalization and liberalization. Any improvement in Soviet-Sino relations will have its ramifications for India. There is also an impact on the strong Indian diaspora that is present in that region, threatening the lives of thousands of Indian students. And as an answer to this, the Indian government has launched Operation Ganga and is making every possible effort to bring back all the students who are stranded in Ukraine amidst such dire conditions. Now, India's stand has always been for a peaceful resolution of the situation through sustained diplomatic efforts for long-term peace and stability in the area. Immediately after annexation, India abstained from voting in the UN General Assembly on a resolution that sought to condemn Russia. So India did not vote. It didn't vote either in favor of condemning Russia kani lekapothe against the motion. India did not vote in the UN General Assembly. In 2020, India had voted against Ukraine-sponsored resolution in the UN General Assembly that was tabled to condemn the alleged human rights violation in Crimea. Crimea occupation lo human right violation jarigindi ani oka resolution raise chesindi Ukraine UN General Assembly lo. Deentlo Ukraine ka against ga vote vesindi India in the year 2020. India's position is largely rooted in neutrality, and it has adapted itself to the post-2014 status quo on Ukraine, that is before the annexation of Crimea. Now, what will be the way forward? What is going to be the next strategy? The US, along with other Western countries, is expected to revive the peace process through diplomatic channels that are waiting in Belarus, a neighboring country of both Ukraine and Russia. And experts have recommended more dialogues between the West and Russia to diffuse the tensions across the world. Ukraine should approach and focus on working with its Normandy format allies, that is both France as well as Germany, who can persuade the Russian government to withdraw assistance to the proxies and restore safe reintegration of Ukraine. The Russian military expansion in Ukraine can be prevented on geo-economic grounds, which will hamper its trade in the region, especially in the Nord Stream pipeline that has carved a way out of the resolving of the ongoing crisis. The next thing, Ukraine's internal disturbances also, like the insurgency that is happening in the southeastern part of Ukraine, in the Donetsk regions, that also needs to be addressed, and they should think of reviving the Mints2 Agreement. The Mints2 Agreement is a 13-point agreement that involved representatives from Russia, Ukraine, and the Organization of Society and Security and Cooperation in Europe, and it was signed in 2015, and this is obvious failure of the Mints2 Agreement. Now, the European Parliament has consented to Ukraine's joining in the EU, and the US President Joe Biden has declared that all US airspaces will remain closed for Russian aircrafts until further notice. In the event of Operation Ganga happening quite successfully, there is a bad news also that 2 Indian students have died, one in the cross-firing, in the shelling, and the other, who belonged to Punjab, succumbed to a heart attack. Now, as we shoot this video, there is a massive Russian troop buildup across all the borders of Europe, of Ukraine. As you can see, this whole region. Okay, and as we shoot this video, Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, is under severe threat, with the Russian troops waiting about 30 to 35 kilometers away from the Ukrainian capital. As we shoot this video, 2 other important cities, Kharkiv and Kherson, both Ukrainian cities have fallen to the Russian army. The Russian army has got Chernobyl nuclear plant under its control, as well as this early morning there was news of a missile attack on one of the oil depots in Ukraine. So as you and I discuss this huge conflict that may have worse implications, let's pray that this conflict is peacefully resolved, and let's hope that people come back to their homes and continue to lead peaceful lives. For more such interesting contemporary burning topics and much more, please do subscribe to our channel, T1 Academy. Thanks for watching.